Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Kate Kite, the Continuing Education Coordinator for Illinois Heartland Library System, and thank you for joining us today for our third Thursday Continuing Education program. Just a couple things of housekeeping. Since we are all through Zoom today, please make sure that you are muted and your video is stopped to ensure that everybody has a seamless experience as possible. And also, if you would like to have attendance registered in L2, please make sure that you rename yourself. That you can go to your box, the three dots. That's the last option with either your first and last name or your first name and your library. Today we have a special guest, Mark Trieglaff, and Mark is the founder and CEO of ACTServices. Mark has a BS in Outdoor and Therapeutic Recreation and an MS in Park and Recreation Administration. Mark holds a certification as a professional associate with the National Association of ADA Coordinators. For 18 years, Mark worked as the access coordinator for people with disabilities at Brookfield Zoo. Mark also worked at LCM Architects as an accessibility specialist, working alongside Jack Catlin, who was chair of the Access Board during the development of the new 2010 Americans with Disability Act accessibility guidelines. Mark has also presented at both state and national conferences. As of 2024, Mark has presented at 12 international conferences on universal design, and his papers have been published in the UK and Israel. In February of 2023, he spoke at the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of People with Disabilities at the UN Center in Vienna, Austria. He has since then been asked to be on an advisory committee for the Zero Project in conjunction with the UN in Vienna. And we are very excited to have Mark joining us today to talk to us about service animals and the ADA and how that pertains to the library. So I'm going to go ahead and mute and stop my video and turn it over to you, Mark.
Okay. Well, great. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Obviously, let us know if that is a problem for you. So, great to be here. We were talking that the weather is really bad up here in the Chicagoland area, so it's a good thing we have the ability to do this by Zoom because it's pretty nasty right now. So, anyway, just wanted to say hello to everyone, and obviously already got kind of a little introduction on kind of my background in that. And so just kind of a quick overview of what we're going to be doing today. I wanted to give obviously already got a little bit of from Kate the background of ACTServices and myself. Kind of reviewing some of the ADA requirements as it is related to service animals, some of the difference between a service animal and what's a therapy or comfort animal. Those are something that's very distinctive, and ones that are protected, ones that are not protected. Some of the policy and procedures that you might want to be thinking about. I'm going to go over some of the frequently asked questions. Is not going to go over all of them, but ones that I get asked quite often. So I think they're probably some of your questions as well. And then just a couple of resources from Department of Justice. Obviously, we've kind of gone over my background in that. So one of the things that I just wanted to point out is that the ADA, signed back in 1990, is kind of divided up in, they call it titles. So it's almost like chapters of a book. So Title One's employment. Title II is state and local governments, which is, I have to assume, is going to be the focus for everyone here. Title III would be public accommodations, or like a nonprofit or businesses would be covered. Title IV is related to communication, related to relay systems for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, for telephone systems and that. And then Title V is kind of miscellaneous items that weren't covered in the other titles. And so they're kind of a lot of more the legal requirements of the ADA. So one of the things I kind of wanted to point out is that I kind of know service animals kind of from both the professional standpoint and personal standpoint. So we actually were foster parents for two service puppies. And the first one was really good. His name was Cole. He got placed with a boy that used a wheelchair. Cole got him trained to be able to, if the boy Michael knocked something off of his tray of his wheelchair, he would Cole would pick it up, put it back up on his tray. Also, he was kind of a weaker upper body, so if he got to a ramp slope that was kind of steep, there was like a pole on his wheelchair, and he could hook Cole's leash on there, and Cole could help him pull up the ramp. So that was his he was a great dog, very high energy American Black Lab. And then this is Sam. This was during the Lord of the Rings. So this is Samwise Gamgee is how we named him. And so he was one of our the second puppy that we had. And I want to show you a second picture here. So he was if you could see his neckerchief there, it says obedient school dropout. Sammy didn't make the cut. And most service dogs of a proper high quality training program will not meet the requirements. I think there's about an 80% dropout rate related to that. So Sam was a great dog, sweet dog, but he was just not motivated to do anything. So I always describe him, he should be out in California sitting on the beach watching the waves coming in, and he would have been happy as a clam. So he was a sweet dog. He ended up being my daughter's pet. So everything ended well for Sam, but he just was not a service animal. He was definitely a comfort animal for sure. Now, under the ADA, the protection right now is related to when the 2010 standards were revised, because there was so much confusion related to service animals and what that meant. So dogs and miniature horses are the ones that have been protected under the ADA. I'd like to tell a quick story. When I was at Brookfield Zoo, I was there during the 90s when the ADA had been signed, but it hadn't really clarified what a service animal was. And I got called to one of the gates, and there was a guy with an 8-foot boa constrictor, and that was his comfort animal, made him feel good and happy. At that point, there was nothing I could do to kind of say, hey, you really shouldn't be here. But at that point, we just had to kind of say, okay, let people know you're not from the zoo. This is not a zoo animal. Please stay away. A lot of people don't like snakes, all these different things. So it was kind of, in many respects, a wild, wild west related to what animals were being used for service animals. So it got down to dogs. Now, miniature horses kind of came into play because there are a number of people who are very allergic to a dog dander. And so there was a request as they were kind of updating the ADA as to what would be an alternate animal that they could use. And miniature horses came up. They're about the same size and weight as like a large, say, black lab or golden retriever or German shepherd. And there's also different sects, apparently, of the Muslim religion that consider dogs a dirty animal. So they also requested a different animal, and this is what they came up with. Now, I do tell people that with working at Brookfield Zoo, at one time I was a seasonal keeper when I was in college in the children's zoo, and I worked with some of the miniature horses. And I not sure that they would be the best service animal, but a lot of people that have them like them because they live much longer than dogs. They'll even live, maybe over 20 years compared to a dog that they have to replace after, say, about 8 years or so. So they can keep the same animal for a long time. So just so you kind of know a little bit of that. Now, there are things that are not valid for restricting a service animal, service dogs, miniature horse from coming in. So concern about allergies, fear of dogs, especially people have fear of dogs, concern of dogs having an accident. They should be very well trained that they would not have an accident. Not allowing dogs into food establishment areas, restaurants. So not in the, we're not talking about the kitchen area, but kind of the general restaurant or cafe area in that. And just some of the concerns related to things about the animal being under control. This is just if you're thinking this might happen. Now, the other part, a valid part, is if these things do occur, that you do have all legitimate rights for saying, hey, this dog really, really needs to be removed from the premises, or the horse, the miniature horse. So if a dog is barking or growling or say urinating all over the place, showing aggressive behavior towards any of the patrons that are coming to the library, jumping on people, running around, a horse could be kicking or biting. Those are legitimate reasons for removing them from the library. Now, one of the things you should do is that say, okay, the dog, the horse has to be removed from here, but you are welcome to come back, but you just can't bring your service animal with you. So you want to try to still be welcoming, from a legal standpoint, but just say it can't be with that particular service animal because of concerns for safety is kind of a big aspect of that. So a couple of questions that you can ask if somebody comes into your establishment and you're not quite sure if there is a legitimate service animal that's coming in. So is that a service dog or horse required because of a disability? Now you can't ask what the disability is, but you can just ask, is it because of a disability? And if they say yes, you can ask, what is the work or task that they do? Now, obviously, if somebody is totally sight lost and they're using a guide dog that I think most people are very familiar with the harness that they hold on to, I think it's pretty obvious, that is somebody that is legitimately has a service animal for getting around. Some of them, people look fine and healthy, but there might be some particular tasks that they do for that particular person. We're going to cover a few of those. So obviously, like a guide dog, as you think of somebody with a low vision or visual impairment, that dog is the one that's going to guide them along a street in through a building, making sure that they don't run into something that might be low hanging that person might not be able to see, and the dog should go take them around that so they won't run into that. Seizure dogs is kind of one of them that the person might look totally healthy and not have any kind of health issues or disability, but a seizure dog, what they are trained to do is that somebody who is having like an aura is what they have just before they're having a full seizure, they release a certain body odor. And when that happens, the dog is trained to either get their medication to them or maybe pushing them to a more open area. So say if they're going to fall to have a seizure, like a grand mal seizure, that would be something that, like say if they were at the top of the stairs, that dog would train them to try to push them away from the stairs so they don't end up falling down the stairs. So that's what a seizure dog does for people. Hearing ear dogs are ones for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, especially if they are at their home and somebody rings the doorbell. That dog would run to the door and run back to the person and back to the door in case they didn't know that anybody was there. That alerts them that somebody's at the door for them. Support dogs are a dog that, like say, if somebody has balance issues in that, typically it's a larger dog, so that if somebody falls, the dog can help them either by coming next to them so that they can push up to help them stand up, or sometimes they can hold on to a leash or a harness and the dog would help pull that person up. So those are a couple of the very, very, very specific tasks that the dogs could perform for somebody. One of the things I just wanted to point out too, related to miniature horses, some of the sizes in that. So a miniature horse, like I said, is very much about the same size as one of a large dog breeds. The golden retrievers, black labs, shepherds, those are the type of things that they are size-wise and weight-wise. They should be housebroken. And be honest, that's the one area I have a question in, because I had with working at the zoo with the miniature horses, I don't know how you can train them compared to a dog. They can go to the bathroom on command, and people who are going to fly in an airplane will do that with their dog and tell them, say, okay, they'll take them to the relief area and say, okay, go, and the dog should urinate or defecate before getting onto the plane, so that's no issue once they're on the plane. Horses, I'm not sure on that. That's one of those areas I would say is kind of a question from my standpoint related to that. But I understand kind of some of the desire for having that type of animal, for the different reasons I had talked about earlier. So the difference between a service animal, therapy, emotional, or comfort animal is very, very different. The tasks are very specific from an emotional standpoint that makes that person feel better or happy, or they might use those type of descriptions related to that. Now, the animals have been used for like soldiers that have returned from Iraq and Afghanistan as a for PTSD. So, say for example, there's like a high alert. A lot of times, soldiers coming back just because of what they've gone through, and say if they were going to do an ATM, work on an ATM, the dog would stand behind them and be alert to anybody behind them. That's something that the soldiers have had great deal of difficulty is just this high alert that they still have related from being in a war zone and that. And so if somebody would be coming, the dog might bark and just alert that person that there is somebody coming. But as long as they have their back, it's like literally they have their back covered in that sense. Or I've seen a video where a gentleman, whenever a jet went over, it reminded him of kind of close contact with some jets that had dropped some bombs right near their group, and you could see he kind of went back to that situation. So the dog would jump onto him and kind of bring him back to uh, his reality, right at that point, not like a flashback that he would be having from that military operation and that. Now, the other thing, there could be a lot of different animals that had been used related to this, and you could kind of see all the different ones. Like on listen, I know there's a lot more. Turkeys, parrots, even bees, which was kind of an interesting one. I found out about that one was that some people that might get nervous or anxiety, they would have bees in a jar, put it up on their arm to get stung, and that helped relax them. That was a new one I had not heard of before. So you could kind of see there was like that was I was saying like the wild wild west that was out there, and that used to be like on airplanes. And now the Fair Housing Act, where people are in a housing unit, say a condo or apartment building, those are still very protected related to comfort animals and that. So, but that's very different than going into public areas. It's like a private residence. That's where they would be protected and be able to have some type of emotional support, comfort animal, or therapy animal. So I hope that kind of clarifies a little bit of that difference. I just kind of wanted to show you. So the Air Transportation Act, that one was kind of a one that was pretty wild for a while. And you could kind of see a couple pictures on the right. Somebody had a comfort turkey. And so one of the passengers in the seat behind took that picture. Or there was like, pigs that people had. Vietnamese potbelly pigs were very popular. There were a couple, I guess, that kind of went wild on the plane, and a couple of people were bit. So it just got very kind of out of control. Now, so the Air Transportation Act does allow like dogs, cats, even birds, but they have to be in a carrier. They can't be loose like as you can see in those other pictures, they were loose and they potentially could be running around the plane. You could even like that old movies about snakes on the plane. At that point, you could have had a snake on the plane. Uh, but yeah, I'm sure that wouldn't have gone over too well for a lot of people. So So I wanted to go over a few of the frequently asked questions that I have gotten, and actually the Department of Justice has put together a whole list of these. I'm not going to go through all of those, but I'm going to go through ones I have gotten asked multiple times. And so these are ones that kind of over and over again that I have heard. And so I think that these might be ones that you have run into. So so one of the things that I get asked, do the service animals have to be professionally trained in order to do their tasks that they're supposed to? And that is no. That several different organizations, National Federation for the Blind is one of them. They really want to have uh, uh, the ability by the owner to train the dog. And it can be a mixed result. Some of the Canine Companions for Independence, you might have heard that one. That's a very well-known group. They do extremely extensive training. And the dogs that come through that program are just a real high quality. If they make it through, I think they have even a higher a dropout rate. I think it's about 90%. So they like about 10% of the dogs that they trained are just really, really high quality. And ones that I think everybody would be very comfortable to have that kind of dog in their facility. But individuals like National Federation of Blind has really wanted the ability to have the flexibility for the owners to train the dog. And there might be some specific tasks that they want to do, but that is something that is right at this point not a requirement of having certain organizations or that training them. But there might be some things related to state and local governments related to covering animals and training. I have a concern about that in different places. I know California is very protective of that. So I had an incident where I had a group that wanted to come to the zoo when I was at the zoo, bringing their service dog for training to expose them to crowds as well as animals. And so just a very different environment than walking through the mall or whatever. So it's like, so we did it early in the morning before public was there, just to kind of first see the animal reaction. One of the things, I was in the children's zoo area, and we had an area where the llamas, it was kind of a low fence. And the dog jumped up and tried to bite the llama. And to me, that's a dog that should be flunked out of the program. One of the things that has been in some of the states like California, they would protect that dog still, saying, oh, it's still in process. But a lot of times when the dog is doing something that aggressive, to me, that would be something I would say, okay, that's a dog that's going to flunk out of the program or should flunk out of the program. They should not be doing that kind of behavior. But just so you know, there could be incidents, especially here in Illinois or the Midwest area, especially in like Chicago, that would be protected. So other places it would not. So the other question I get, is there a national certification for service animals? And again, the answer is no, there's no national certification. To me, it makes sense that would be something that could or should be required. Just the basics of, stay, sit, though lay, all those things you might do with your own dog that I think is something that just makes sense for a service animal to have some of those basic obedience trainings, but there's no national certification. Now, there are some nonprofit organizations that will provide some kind of certification if they go through some type of program or can show they can do the certain behaviors and that they require. But again, it's nothing that is a national requirement or ability for people to be able to use. So if a service animal has a vest that says service animal, that must be a legitimate service animal that's protected under the ADA. Again, this is a no. You can go on Amazon and buy these vests, and there used to be people that would do that all the time, that would buy these and then be able to take their dog, on the plane and not have to pay a fee. So that was something that people had been doing for quite a while. So that is something just to be aware. You can get these vests any place. I think there's even some of the vet stores that sell them as well. But you can go online, Amazon. I'm sure there's multiple other websites that you can pick those up without any problem at all. So I'm going to kind of cover a little area. I don't know if that's also not only the public area, but maybe touch on a little bit. If you hire a staff member that has a service animal, can you restrict them from bringing their service animal? And that would be part of your process from the hiring standpoint. And a lot of that kind of depends on really kind of what the job is of the person. Now, that might be their accommodation. That might be what they need in order to do their job. And so having that animal there is very important for them. And that would be something that they would have been part of if the person met all the requirements related to work and they happen to have that service animal to get throughout the building, say for a guide dog or things like that, that would be something that would be protected. Now, there could be restrictions, and I know it won't affect your particular situation, but say if it was a kitchen, somebody was a cook, or somebody was, helping in surgical areas where you need a sterile environment, clean environment, that's where, the dog would be restricted from going in. That it just kind of makes total sense from the health standpoint related to that. So, excuse me. So city and state requirements for vaccination and licenses, does that apply to service animals? And that would be yes. And I don't know if everybody here is from Illinois, but in Illinois, that is a requirement. So just kind of like any other dog, pet, should be vaccinated for, say rabies and all the different things that would be required by the state and local governments. So that would be something that the service animal as well would need to be part of that and be part of getting that medical shots in that. So can any dog breed be a service animal? And that's a really good question. And again, that kind of is a regional thing, because one of the restrictions, I believe it's in Denver, if I remember correctly, and that was very controversial, was that they were restricting the use of pit bull dogs, because one of the things is dogs, a pit bull, any kind of the situations that you typically hear related to somebody being bitten or attacked. There's a very, very high percentage of them who are pit bull. So that is something that different, depending on where you're at in the country, that might be a breed that would be restricted. One of the things I do like to point out to people, my daughter was a vet tech, a veterinarian assistant, and so she would help the veterinarians, and she would say that they ended up having to put down pit bull dogs probably at least once a month, sometimes even more, because they had attacked someone. So that is just awareness, I think, of that breed. There are a number of them I've met, have several friends that do have that, even family members that have that. And, real sweet dog, very energetic. It's a working dog. It's a high energy dog. But that is something that has been restricted in some areas of the country. So just so you're kind of aware of that. So what does it mean for a service animal to be under control? And that doesn't mean it always has to be on the leash. And that's really a very good question, because I think that's where you can kind of determine, a little bit of what is the service animal, what's a task that it's supposed to be doing. So there's different situations where actually the dog should be loose. One example, if you go on YouTube, there's a gentleman that has used an electric wheelchair, and he's looks like he's kind of a very limited. Obviously, he doesn't appear he can walk, and very limited upper body. And what his dog is trained to do, so if he comes up to a door with an automatic door on it, his dog is loose and would run up and with its paw hit the push plate for opening up the automatic door. And so that is something that if he had it on a leash would be very restrictive of the dog to be able to do that task. So that is something that, has legitimacy to it, that is something that really helps. Having that dog off a leash is something that allows the dog to do its task for its master. But there might be other situations, and we had this at Brookfield Zoo, where somebody said that was their service animal. And the next thing we see is this dog is kind of running around all over the place. And it's like, well, it should be very close by its master, owner. And because it's supposed to be working, it's supposed to be attentive to caring for its owner and what tasks that owner might want it to do. So it should not be an animal that's just kind of running around free, doing whatever, especially like at the zoo. It was something, there were so many different smells and odors, all that. You can understand where a dog would be very attentive to that and attracted to that. But that is something that they really need to be under control, voice command when they're not on a leash. Otherwise, almost 100% of the time, they should be on a leash. that they're again kind of staying close to their owner, because again they're doing a specific task. Like the little boy Michael that I had talked about earlier, he had a leash on his dog Cole, I'm sorry, Cole, and so he would be one that he would be right next to him. And again, like if he needed to, Michael could hook him onto his wheelchair, even though he had very limited arm motions in that. But he kind of had his leash right there, just so he could be able to do that task for him if he's on that steeper slope and ramp. So that's something very specific to that. So if a service animal is being disrupted, the barking, growling, urinating, all those things, or kicking, like the horse and that can be asked to leave. So that's, we kind of covered that in that slide before, but I really wanted to kind of emphasize that if there is a safety issue that seems to be occurring related to the animal, and potentially any of your patrons that are coming to the library, and there's a safety concern, that by far is legitimate for asking that person to leave with the dog or the horse. But that you should be able to, you should tell them you're welcome to come back. You just can't bring your service animal with you. So it's still, it partially is trying to protect you from a legal standpoint, and the other part of it is just trying to still be accommodating and welcoming to that person as well. So that's very important for you to make sure that you do. One other thing that you might, if you haven't done it already, you should have some type of a grievance procedure, and also service dog policy and procedure related to that. So that if anything does occur, again, it's trying to protect you legally from any type of a lawsuit that could happen. And lawsuits can come in three different forms. They can come from the federal government, Department of Justice, a state's attorney's office, or people can sue individually as well. So those are the three ways that you could get into legal difficulty. And that grievance procedure, the whole intent there is really trying to make sure that you have a process in place. So if somebody says they had an issue, it's something that you could say, well, within, let me talk with staff. We're going to, within 2 weeks, we will get back to you, related to your concern that you had, or comment that you had, or complaint. And so it's really trying to keep it out of the legal system. So that is something that's very important. If you don't have that already, a grievance procedure and in place policy and procedure, that's very important to get that done sooner than later. And the other part of that, I would, if you on your website, share that on the website. So people with any kind of a disability, they're going to check websites in order to see if they can be able to come to your facility easily. You should have what's called a transition plan that kind of looks at the whole facility. Obviously, we're talking specifically on service animal, but it was be something to evaluate from the physical standpoint, from being able to get into the building, from accessible parking, into restrooms, all those things. The other thing is a policy and procedure for other power-driven mobility devices. People are using other devices other than just a scooter or a wheelchair. They're using Segways. Down Florida, they use golf carts, all these things, but there's a reason you should restrict those as well. So that's kind of the whole package that's part of the ADA and some of the ADA requirements in that. So again, kind of like I said, you can ask them to leave. And again, you have those two questions you can ask them if that helps you, related to clarifying if that is specifically a service animal or just somebody's pet that they're bringing into your building. So, and again, that's not going to be 100%. Some people know the law well enough that they can say, oh, yes, this is a service animal. This is the one that helps me, because I'm hard of hearing. And they might just be making up something. Unfortunately, that happens. People are going to abuse the situation, but again, hopefully it could kind of limit that situation as well. We had people, at the zoo and said, "Oh yeah, this is a service animal," and they gave us a whole story, and then later on, we saw, the dog running around free, like I had mentioned. So those are things that you can, definitely having those questions, making sure that your staff has them, maybe have a little card or something they can have with them that they can actually read to a person and say, with the reference with the ADA and say, this is legitimate things I can ask you, and those are things that would be very important. Maybe in a staff training or something like that, that might be a good thing to share with them as well. So a couple of resources that would be very helpful for you. So this is the Department of Justice website. So it's ada.gov, so a very easy website. And so that has very specific questions or information related to service animal. They also actually have a very simple fact sheet that you can maybe duplex and maybe different areas, the desks, different desks that are throughout the library, just so staff would have that and they can refer to that if they had any kind of questions. Or like I said, maybe just a little card or something that's at the information desk or checkout desk, wherever it might be. And then the frequently asked questions, that those were some of the things that I didn't cover all of them. It's pretty extensive. There might be some questions that you have that I didn't cover through the ones that I kind of went through. Those are things that are ones that have gotten asked repeatedly. So that's why I thought I would just kind of highlight those. I'm going to assume that probably hits a lot of people's questions that they might have. But there are a lot of other areas that are kind of covered as well. So those are things that I just wanted to kind of point out to you related to that. And so that you have that ability to have those resources. The other thing I would say is maybe having check with your state or local governments, because again, there might be other more restrictive or things that you're not aware of, kind of like I said about training, dogs in training. So that might be something that maybe in your particular city or state, that would be something that's allowed. And many other areas of the country, it is not allowed. So those would be things that you might want to be aware of and be more informed of. But the DOJ, at least for the Americans with Disabilities Act, this is the one that would be the place that you would be able to cover those kind of questions probably that you would have. But then again, like I said, there might be some other additional information that would be helpful for you also. And I think that is my last slide there. Yep. And so I think at this point, what we're going to do is go to um, asking, I think, open to some questions in that. Got done a little earlier than I expected, but I hope that kind of uh, gave you a pretty good overview. And obviously, if there's a lot more questions or specific situations of that, we could always kind of talk through that too.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark. Those were great resources and that was great information.
Good.
We did have one question come in through chat.
Okay.
It said, we have had a trainer bring three puppies without any prior warning to our story time, and then
Mhm.
later in the week to simply hang out in our children's room, stating that she is legally allowed to do that since they are service dogs in training, and that by law she didn't need to give us any notice. Is
Mhm.
this true? I didn't necessarily have a problem with it if I would have been able to notify parents ahead of time. Some
Mhm.
parents left due to allergies or fear. The rest of the story time was basically ruined because the remaining children just wanted to play with the puppies.
Yeah, understandable. Yeah, again, I don't know exactly the location of that, but that would be something if it's a dog in training and if it's protected in that area, that city or state or whatever, that would be, they could legitimately do that. I would think from the standpoint of trying to communicate with that person, especially it sounds like they do that repeatedly, that would be something that I think would be very appropriate to have that communication with, because obviously it ended up ruining the whole idea of the time that the kids were going to have together. I could totally understand. They're going to be distracted with puppies instead of the story that's going on. And just trying to have a working relationship with that person and understanding, and maybe kind of be able to guide them a little bit, maybe appropriate times if it's legitimately protected for the training standpoint, that they could actually also maybe there's a different time, maybe when there's adults there or something like that, or when it's a slower time, just so it's something that's a little more balanced for the staff, I would say, as well as that person with the puppies in training. So hopefully that kind of helps you out.
Yeah, and to give you context, Mark, everyone who is attending today works at I believe, a public library in Illinois.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and then I had a question. You
Mhm.
mentioned grievance policies and having those on hand. Do you know where we can find examples? Do you know of any organizations that already have those online that libraries could look at and craft their own or borrow from?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I think going to that Department of Justice website would help you a lot. That one's a really important one if people don't have that already. That was actually a requirement of when the ADA was revised in 2010. So that's what, 14 years ago. That is something, again, what you're trying to do is really keep you from getting into legal issues with somebody, getting it into the courts, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The whole idea is trying to take care of whatever the issue is beforehand, before you get lawyers involved. Because once you get the lawyers involved, that's a lot of money, time, energy, and emotions, obviously, with something like that. So that is something. The biggest thing, the reason that kind of came into play is people beforehand, if they had a concern or complaint, there was nobody that they could go to or no process. So every place should have somebody designated what they call an ADA coordinator. That's like that certification that I've gotten. And so that is kind of like the point person for anybody that has any concerns or complaints. And then they would fill out the form. And if they could answer it right away, they would. But otherwise, trying to provide a time limit to get a response back to that person. Because what was happening before is people would have a complaint or concern, and they kind of got bounced around to different people and nobody got back to them. And then finally they got so frustrated, they said, well, I'm just going to sue you. And so that's what ended up happening. And then it got into all the legal requirements and court cases. So that's why it's really important to have that if you don't have that already.
Thank you. We had a question come in the Q&A. Can
Mhm.
comfort animals be restricted?
Yeah, under the ADA, they can be restricted. That was kind of like that one slide. So emotional support dogs, comfort animal, therapy animal, anything that is related to somebody's it makes me feel good, makes me feel happy, anything like that that is a description, that would be something that's not the task, as we kind of talked about, that dog is doing, that's protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now, the one caveat to that would be like a soldier with PTSD. And that one's kind of a little bit more gray area because it is trying to meet their needs related to PTSD and kind of high anxiety, what do I say, alertness that a lot of soldiers will have because of being in the war zone. And so that's kind of one of those areas that kind of gets a little close to that comfort animal, but they have specific tasks, like I mentioned about like the gentleman or woman that would be doing the ATM and would have their back turned, and that dog would be alert for them to let them know if anybody might be coming up behind them. So that would be, some of the things that I would say from the standpoint of covered animal, they would not be protected under the ADA for sure.
Thank you.
Mhm.
We have about 15 minutes, a little bit less than 15 minutes for more questions. So if anybody has a question, please feel free to put it in the Q&A or the chat, or even go ahead and unmute yourself and ask.
Mhm.
I appreciated the information about the miniature horses because I knew that they were considered a service animal,
Mhm.
but I really did not know anything else beyond just that. So I appreciated learning more about that.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
that was one a lot of people were not aware of, and I know there was a woman, I think she was out in Boston that had a Shetland pony, which is quite a bit bigger than a miniature horse. But that was kind of before they kind of did the restrictions, or the revisions in the 2010 standards. So that's a big animal to be able to take around to different places. And that, but she had a harness. She was blind, and that's how she was using the Shetland pony.
and Tina Hubert shared that the Illinois State Library has a template for an ADA policy, and that is in the chat for anybody who
Okay.
is interested.
Okay. Yeah, and like I said, if you hopefully everybody has what's called a transition plan. That's kind of where this service animal policy would come into play. The other, like I just talked about real briefly, the other power-driven mobility devices, of restriction for that. You don't want to have like obviously a gas-powered engine in your library spewing exhaust, So that's all kind of part of that transition plan and evaluating the building, parking spaces, all that. And so that's where the service animal policy would have been part of that whole review.
We haven't gotten any more questions, but we did get a link to an NPR article about a support alligator. Mark, had you heard about the support alligator?
Wow. Okay. I haven't heard that one. I've heard about lots of them, like I said, the snakes, the bees, that one was kind of new to me. We had, when I was at the zoo, we actually had a capuchin monkey that, you think they would have been the organ grinder monkeys from years and years ago that were trained to work with people who were quadriplegic. And that was from out east as well, I think in the Boston area also. So there it was, you had all these different types of animals and yeah, so that's a new one to me. I had not heard that one. Was that something very recent? It sounds like that was very recent.
Yes, let's see. The article is from May of this year.
Okay, wow. Okay. That's what I was saying. Especially comfort animals, it's kind of been like I said, I had people who had the gentleman with the boa constrictor, ferrets. That was very popular for a long time. People would have ferret like stuck inside their coat. Uh, trying to think what different dogs that obviously were pets for somebody. And so kind of one of the things that we ended up at the zoo restricting them from different, so our walk-in farmyard animal area where all the animals had been quarantined. So having an outside animal, they were really trying to restrict that. And typically the animal is very healthy, all those things, but they might be carrying something. It could be a tick or whatever that could get on one of the zoo animals. So that was an area we restricted in. A lot of times I would just take that person through those areas. Usually it was like a walk-in farmyard area where we had the goats and sheep and maybe one of the miniature horses. But that would be one area we restricted in. The other was an area, the kudu, which is a very large antelope. It's like 5 feet right at the shoulders. And we restricted service animals from going there because there had been incidences at the Denver Zoo and San Diego Zoo where the male, when they saw a dog, considered her apparently like a predator, and they had like a harem of other female kudus that they were like protecting, and so they would charge, and they actually several got injured trying to attack the service animal at those particular zoos. So we have very legitimate things that we could say, we have this understanding of this record from these other places. So obviously a zoo is a very unique place compared to a library. But if you have very legitimate things, kind of like with, say if you had a kitchen program, I don't know if there's anything like that. Anything like with food that you might want to restrict just from the health standpoint, that would be something that would could be legitimate as well.
Someone did weigh in. I want to get your perspective on this, Mark,
Mhm.
that under the FAQ on ADA.gov, it does say that if the service animal would fundamentally alter the nature of a service or program, it may be prohibited. And this is in response to the puppies at story
Puppy?
time. That said
Yeah.
that they say that they think that the puppies being at story time would be taking away attention away from the reader and be considered fundamentally altering the program.
Yeah, I think that's a very good argument. I think that would be very true because obviously it's taking the kids away from obviously the reading that's going on or the other activities. They're distracted, and I think that that's a discussion with that trainer and understanding that hey, there might be a different time that might be a good time when there's not a specific program that you're doing that the puppies are just going to be a total distraction for. Like I said, I could understand that for sure. A bunch of puppies and running around. I suspect they're probably nice dogs, but maybe not as well trained. And so they're going to be ones that are going to be kind of probably want to move around, and that's going to catch the attention of the kids. So I think that's a very very good legitimate argument to use related to that. And I think that's a discussion to have with that gentleman and be able to show them from Department of Justice website that this is changing the program. And but trying to find like an alternate time if they really want to train those, kind of working with them, kind of like what we were doing with the dogs in training. We had them come before the zoo even opened and just kind of started out that way, kind of slowly, and just to make sure that everything was going to be okay related to that. And then kind of other times we would say if you came when you want public there, kind of doing it in the afternoon when it's not quite as busy, again, trying to ease that animal into being exposed to crowds and that. So I think that's a very good argument.
Thank you. Let's see. Last call for questions. Does anybody have any questions for Mark? Lacey said this was incredibly interesting and very helpful. Mark, thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. I think the questions, the frequently asked questions and answers, those were very helpful. Thank you. Great information and presentation. Great.
Okay.
So thank you so much for joining us, Mark.
Yeah, it was great. Like I said, we have kind of like a personal involvement that we've had over the years when my daughter did the training with the two puppies and that. So that was just an area that she was very excited to do when she was kind of like a mid-teenager. And so it was a great thing to kind of keep her busy too. But also, being able to help somebody out with having the service animals and that. And then kind of my experience with the zoos and those type of things, just you understand it better, kind of both sides, understanding how they help people, but also what's appropriate in different locations. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. And I know you are traveling overseas today. So
Yeah.
safe travels.
Thank
And
you. Thank you.
thank you again. And to everyone, we are going to take, it's 10:55. We're going to take just a 5-minute break and then we will switch over to our Members Matter meeting. So thank you again, Mark, for joining us. And everyone will see you soon.
Okay, good. Thank you, everybody.